Welcome to the worship services of the First Missionary Baptist Church in Huntsville. We're striving to become one of the most loving churches in all the world. Please join us now for a portion of our worship service.
May I suggest to us this morning that if we're going to handle our giants, whatever the giant is, and you know better than I what your giant is this morning, because every one of us in here has one. Don't fool yourself. Giants keep coming. God helps you to whip one and another one rises. Sometimes bigger than the first one. You know what your giant is, don't you? You know what you're wrestling with this morning, don't you? You know what's eating at your life, don't you? You know what's gnawing on you this morning, don't you? Your giant is there, but you can handle him by the power of God. You can take him out by the power of God. But you've got to cultivate your faith in God and watch God work for you. One way to do it is to keep company with God. Don't just mouth religion, Christianity. Keep company with God and make it real. See, too many of us got cliche religion. We know all the cliches. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, oh, praise the Lord. Oh, I'm highly blessed and favored, I'm highly blessed and favored. Oh. And then 15 minutes later, the devil is knocking you out. Cliche religion won't work. You got to have it deep on the inside. You got to walk with God through trials and tribulations, hardships and handicaps, and watch him bring you through them. And then you can develop deep faith in God. You can handle the Goliaths of this life. And the way you do it, get up early in the morning. Spend some time with God. Every morning, spend some time with him. Quality time with him. You see, you don't get to know a friend until you spend some time with him. You really don't even get to know your wife until you marry her. You don't get to know God until you spend some time with him. Spend some time with his Bible. Understanding the revelation of God. Understanding who he is in the Bible, and then being able to find out if he's like that in reality. David had been spending time with God. He had been cultivating his relationship with God. He had been allowing God to stretch his spiritual muscles. Letting God make him stronger and stronger in his convictions of God and in his walk with God and his understanding of the reality of God. You know, I've told you this before, but I say it again. When I was at Vanderbilt, my faith got tested. I mean, it really got tested. Oh, I knew God, and I'd been walking with God, and all through college, I walked with God, and even I got to Vanderbilt, I walked with God. But, you know, when my freshman year came along in the master's program, I had a couple of professors. They had 2 doctorates. One had a doctorate from Princeton Theological Seminary and a doctorate from the University of Louisville. Another one had a doctorate from an American university and a German university. And man, as a little freshman, I'm awed by these doctors. And I remember one day, one said something in class that I just didn't agree with. And I said, either he's wrong or I'm wrong. Both of us can't be right because what he just said, it can't be right or I'm wrong. And in essence, what he said, there is nothing authentic in the New Testament except the parables. And you've got to be suspicious of some of them. And I said, my God, that goes against the grain of everything I've been taught. Now, if he's right, I'm wrong. But if I'm right, he's wrong. And that day, and some other days too, I wrestled with some of those theological tenets. But you know what I did? Every time I wrestled with some of those theological tenets, because I was under the tutelage of the doctors, I had to regroup. And I had to get my groundings. And I would be sitting there in the classroom listening to these great doctors. And when sometimes they said something like this one said, I had to come all the way back to Tony, Alabama. I had to take a mental, imaginative journey. And I had to stop off in a pasture, in my daddy's pasture, where I met the Lord, where the Lord bathed my soul in his spirit, where he flooded my soul with his presence, where I knew I met the Lord, where I knew he changed my life, where I knew he touched me like I had never been touched before. I had to come back there and get my groundings. And every time I'd come back there and get my groundings, I could take everything else they said. Because my faith was deeper than their doubt. And you got to know God. You got to cultivate a relationship with him. And even when you go through the storms of the tenets of faith that's stretching your mind so wide that it almost want to take your brains out, you got to come back and get your groundings. Know that you know God. Know that he's real. David knew that God was real. So he was able to say to the rest of them, I'll fight the giant because I believe in God. I trust God. Now, when they heard David talking like this, everybody else scared and running off. Giant has them fleeing like rabbits. They said, we're going to take this boy to king, and we're going to tell the king what this boy is saying. So they took David up to King Saul. They said, King Saul, here's a little boy talking about he'll fight this giant. And King Saul looked at David. He said, son, you just a youth. And that man has been fighting ever since he was a youth. In other words, King Saul said to David, David, you can't handle Goliath. You don't match for him. Man, he'll take that big spear of his and throw it through you and you'll be dead within a second. David said, sir, I need to talk with you. And that brings us to the second thrust of this sermon. That is that we need to keep our faith in historical perspective. Because you see, if you're going to master the present, you also got to be able to stay connected with the past. And if you master the presence by staying connected with the past, it moves you progressively into your future. So you can handle your present and your future because it's connected to your past. Let me see if I can explain that better. If you've had a relationship with God in the past, and you know what God has done for you in the past, when you come to face your present giant, you can draw from your past victories. Each victory will help you, that's what the hymn writer said, some other to win. If you had no victories in the past, you have no faith for the present. But if you had some victories in the past, your past victories can give rise to present confidence as you move into the future. Here it is in the text. Here it is in the text. David said to King Saul, King, I understand you saying I'm a little boy, just a youth, can't handle that big giant. But sir, may I tell you, Your Excellency, I have a record of what God can do. One day, sir, I was out there in the field watching my daddy's sheep, and a bear came in, put his big claws on the lamb and was getting ready to take him out. But sir, God gave me the strength that I was able to take that lamb from that bear's claw and set the lamb free. And then I killed that bear. Sir, on another occasion, a lion came roaring in to take my flock. Sir, by the power of God, I took that lion by his beard and I whipped that lion. I slew that lion. And sir, the God who gave me the strength to kill a bear and to slay the lion will give me strength to take out Goliath. So, sir, I'm trying to tell you, I've had some past relationships with God. I know what God has done in the past. And because of what God has done in the past, I know what he can do in the future. I know what he can do right now. So, sir, I'm telling you, God is real. He's real to me. He's real because what he's already shown me. And I'm standing on the faith of my past experiences at this present moment. I can handle Goliath. You and I must come to that same conclusion, that the God who's blessed us in the past can bless us in the present. What we need to do is pull up our faith files. You need some faith files. You need to pull up your faith files and flip the pages and continue to read about what God has done for you in the past. And because of your experience with God in the past, you've got confidence in God in the present moment. You ought to be able to, those of you old enough, you ought to be able to look back 40 years ago and recall what God did for you 40 years ago. You ought to be able to look back 30 years ago and recall what God did for you 30 years ago. You ought to be able to look back 20 years ago and recall what God did for you 20 years ago. You ought to be able to look back 10 years ago and see what God did for you 10 years ago. You ought to be able to look back 5 years ago and see what God did for you 5 years ago. You ought to be able to look back 1 year ago and see what God did for you 1 year ago. You ought to be able to look back 1 month and see what God did for you last month. You ought to be able to look back last week and see what God did for you last week. You ought to be able to look back yesterday and see what God did for you yesterday. And because of what God did for you in the past, you know what he can do right now. We need a historical connection with what God has done in the past so that we know what he can do right now. Here's how our elders put it. They said this in that song, they had a lot of theology in that singing. They said, you can't make me doubt him. I know too much about him. Now, there's nothing wrong with doubt. Chucky, you've been teaching that in Wednesday night Bible class, how we need to wrestle with doubt and overcome doubt and let our faith suppress our doubts. Lord, I believe, help thou my unbelief. You know, that's what the man in the New Testament said. It's all right to have doubts, but have enough faith to suppress your doubts, to overcome your doubts, you see. They said, you can't make me doubt him. I know too much about him. They're trying to say this. Because of my relationship with God, because of my walk with God, because of what God has done for me in the past, you can't make me doubt him. I've learned too much about him. I know what he can do. And I stand on what he can do. And my faith is grounded right now in what he can do. Well, let's not be too long. If we're going to fight our giants, not only should we develop faith that will help us to overcome giant phobia, and not only should we connect our faith in our historical relationship with God so it can give confidence to the present moment, but we also need to remember that the battle is the Lord's. That's what David said. In the final analysis, at the end of the day, David said to those people, when I get through with Goliath, all this assembly will know, that's verse 47, all this assembly will know that God does not fight with sword and shield or sword and spear, but the battle is the Lord's. Well, if you know that the battle is the Lord's, then you don't need your brother's approval. Where is that in the narrative, Julius? When David was walking around talking about fighting Goliath, his oldest brother, who was already jealous of him, Eliab said, what are you doing here, you little insolent brat? Who sent you over here? Why don't you just take your little stuff on back home and watch those few sheep that your daddy left you with? And David was wondering, what's wrong with him? What's tripping him? What did I say to make him come up with that statement? But you know what David did? He did what you and I ought to do. When folk mess with us, David ignored him. You heard him talking all that stuff. You got a word for it, Chucky. You know. Smack, that's what you all used to say, yeah. I'm talking all that stuff, that's smack, Chucky said. But he didn't pay any attention to him. He ignored him. Sometimes when you're trying to stand for God, when you're working for God, when you're trying to do the will of God and folk around you discouraging you because of lack of faith, ignore them. When you know you're in the center of God's will and they don't want you to be there, they're trying to get you out of it, ignore them. And move right on and do what the Lord tells you to do. You don't need your brother's approval. If God says it's his battle, and you're joining God to fight the battle, you don't need your brother's approval. Not only do you not need your brother's approval, but you don't need the king's armor. Where's that in the text, Julius? Well, you know, when David said, I'll fight Goliath, and he had given these illustrations about what God had done for him in the past, and he was convincing Saul that he should go and fight Goliath because of what God had done in the past. Old Saul finally gave in. King Saul finally gave in. If you must go and fight Goliath, take my armor. Pulled off his helmet, his coat of mail, and all the rest, gave it to David. Little David put on all that heavy stuff. Started walking around. Could hardly walk. Walked back up to Saul and said, Your Excellency, I'm sorry. I can't wear this. I'm not used to this. I can't fight in your armor. I've got to do it my way. And he politely pulled off all of Saul's armor and gave it back to Saul. You and I must learn from this that God has gifted every one of us, and we don't need somebody else's gift. Use your own gift. Wear the armor that God has given you, and you and God fight the battle. Because if you try to be like somebody else and do it the way they do it, then you're going to become an imposter. God can't use imposters. You got to be yourself. Let him use your personality. Phillips Brooks used to talk years ago about preaching is God using personalities to communicate his word. And he has all these varied personalities, diverse personalities that he uses, and he can use every one of them. I'm so glad I learned years ago to admire great preachers, but I don't try to preach like them. I admire the late, great Gardner Taylor. He was one of the most eloquent and passionate preachers that I've ever heard. He preached from this pulpit many years ago. I used to admire, as a boy growing up, that great, voluminous voice of C.L. Franklin and that great melodious hoop that he had. But I discovered I wasn't a C.L. Franklin. And God didn't call me to be a C.L. Franklin. When I heard Manuel Scott and listened to him, how he would use alliteration in his sermons. And he could take alliteration and use it so beautifully, it looked like you could see words dancing on the head of a pin. But I discovered I couldn't be an Emmanuel Scott. God didn't call me to be an Emmanuel Scott. He called me to be a Julius Scruggs. And there's only one Julius Scruggs. And if Julius, you let God use that Julius Scruggs, he can take you to lofty places. He can do great things through you. He can bless many lives through you. But if you go out there trying to be an imposter, God can't use you, because the folk will soon find you out and discover you're not real. So you have to be your real self. Use your own gifts. David said, Saul, I cannot use your armor. I appreciate you offering it to me. Appreciate you letting me use it, but I can't wear it. So he gave it back to him. Then the Bible said he went down to the brook and picked up 5 stones. And when he picked up those 5 smooth stones, he took his staff and his little pouch, put the stones in his pouch and took his sling and went out toward Goliath. When the giant Goliath looked up and saw David coming with his staff and some little pouch, that big giant looked at David and said, you mean to tell me, little boy, you're embarrassing me by coming to fight me with a stick? This day, I'll give your body to the birds of the air and to the beasts of the field. And the Bible said he cursed David in the name of his gods. You better be careful. Cursing God's children in the name of your God. Because God is the Lord God. And no other God like him. He's the only real God in the universe. And when Goliath had finished cursing David in the name of his gods, little David looked up at Goliath with great courage and strength and said, Sir, you come to me in the name of your gods, You come to me with sword and with spear, but I come to you in the name of the Lord God of Israel. And this day, sir, God is going to give your body to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. And about that time, David took one of those smooth stones and put it in that sling, and he started trotting toward Goliath. And he was trotting, and I like to imagine that he was whining, trotting and whining, whining and trotting. And after a while, the Holy Spirit said, let it go. And he let that stone go, and it hit Goliath right in the forehead. And that 9-foot giant fell to the earth and jarred the ground. And when he fell to the ground, all of the Philistines knew that the Lord God was with David. And they started running off. And Israel pursued them, overtook them, and won the battle. They won the battle because David's faith was in God. And God took out Goliath because of David's faith. And from that day to this day, folk have been reading the Bible, and they've come to understand God is a giant slayer. So may I tell you this morning, I don't care what your giant is, God is a giant slayer. You may be fearful, and that's your giant. You may be a person prone to mediocrity, that's your giant. God can slay your giant. You may be addicted to whatever the addiction is, but God is a giant slayer. He knows how to slay your giant. Turn your giant over to the Lord and let the Lord slay your giant. I close as I tell you this. The hymnist put it best for me. Be not dismayed, whatever betide. God will take care of you. Beneath his wings of love abide. God will take care of you. God will take care of you through every day or all the way. He will, God will take care of you. I'm glad I know the Lord this morning. I'm glad he's a giant slayer. I'm glad he can handle every situation. Oh, I'm glad I know the Lord. Do you know him? Have you tried him? Do you know he's all right? He's all right. Doors of the church stand open. Receive anybody who wants to deepen his faith, her faith in God.